Next on the Delaware Way, we do a check on the drinking water in Delaware and a project in South Wilmington to stop flooding. This is the Delaware Way. Welcome to the Delaware Way. I'm Larry Menti. How is the water you're drinking in Delaware? Let's get a health check from Brenna Goggin, who is Director of Advocacy at the Delaware Nature Society, and Martha Narvaez, Policy Scientist at the University of Delaware. Thank you so much both for being here. Let's start with the quality of water, just overall, the drinking water in Delaware.
Yeah, I would say it's great. It's, I would give the drinking water an A. When you're talking more specifically about our surface water and the waterways, I would say that we have some work to do. It's still good. If you want to give it a grade, I'd say maybe a B-, C+. But as most people know, it goes through a filtering and processing treatment at the plants, and our drinking water is great.
But even with the treatment center, even with the processing, the two are connected. If one gets too bad, it's going to be a problem. Is that right?
Well, it depends. So in Newcastle County, the majority of our drinking water comes from surface water. So what the quality of the red clay or the Brandywine will impact our drinking water potentially. In Kent and Sussex County, you're more talking about groundwater. And those have different quality ratings than one another. Certainly, if you've got groundwater issues because of any number of reasons, the potential for it leaching into your well or another groundwater source is great.
And that leads me to the next question, which was, where do we get our water? I know it's from it's aquifers, it's watersheds, it's creeks, it's rivers, all different waterways, right?
Yeah, so right here we're in the city of Wilmington, and we get our drinking water from the Brandywine Creek, or the Brandywine River as some people call it. The headwaters start up in Pennsylvania, and then it travels down into the city of Wilmington's intake, which is right off of Market Street.
I'm going to stay with you for 1 second, and I'm going to get back to the waterways. But you said you give an A to the drinking water because it's basically filtered. It's dealt with. It's processed. Not necessarily to the waterways. Could everything be fixed? I mean, if the waterways continue to deteriorate, let's say, it's still going to be fine with the drinking water? Yeah,
the issue is the cost. So it gets more expensive to treat dirty water. And so that's why a lot of our groups, like the Delaware Nature Society, the University of Delaware Water Resources Center, are working to try and figure out ways where we can protect water at its source, so up in the headwaters. So if there's farming practices that might be contributing to water quality problems, or if there's suburban and urban issues such as over-fertilization or excessive pet waste, those are things that we can deal with at the source, and that can make the treatment process less expensive.
Are they the biggest threats to the waterways, which you just mentioned? The farming and the industrial?
So when you're looking at Newcastle County, some of the greatest threats are actually related to legacy issues. So you're talking about toxics and chemicals, as well as legacy agricultural issues. Certainly in the headwaters of Pennsylvania, agricultural practices are one of our biggest threats. When you're looking at Kent and Sussex County, you don't have so much of the industrial growth the way that Newcastle County did. So the threats there are really more related to our green yards and our desire to wash our cars on the driveway. So stormwater runoff issues. So when you spray fertilizers and pesticides on your yard, they don't just stay there. They end up in the stream or local creek.
Sounds like it's all the same problem, right? I mean, it's all chemicals. It's all chemicals from industry, chemicals from your yard, chemicals from the farm with pesticides. It's all the same thing.
Well, you throw pet waste in there as well, and that's maybe not so much of a chemical.
That's a bacteria.
As a bacteria, but yes.
Yeah, and it's a lot of it. They're man-made problems, right? Yeah. Person-made problems. They're problems. We're doing things on the land, and I think people need to understand that what we do on the land ends up in the water.
So when you want to control the waterways, you control behavior.
Yes. And that's why a lot of us are working on education campaigns and trying to educate every group, whether it's farmers, homeowners, industries, that what they're doing on the land is ultimately ending up in the waterways.
I want to stay with you for a second because you're the one that brought up the processing, and I'm sorry that I'm zoning in on this, but I think that's what people care about,
Right.
what comes out of their tap.
Yeah.
And so when you talk about all these chemicals and you talk about pesticides and maybe industrial waste, that's all filtered away? None of that gets through?
There's all different types of treatment options, and water treatment facilities are used to treating things like that. When there are issues, a lot of times if you're dealing with a surface water supply and let's say you have a flooding event and you have a lot of runoff and a lot of things coming down the stream that the treatment plant is not capable of treating, they'll have reserve sources. So places like Hoops Reservoir, if the city of Wilmington can't treat the volume or the high sediment load that might be coming down in the water, they're going to switch off into a reserve where they can use that water until the volume is lowered or the sediment load is lowered.
I want to hit a couple of other topics, and I know that you wanted to talk about habitat for wildlife in Delaware. And what is the biggest threat to that?
The biggest threat to habitat, not just in Delaware, but or wildlife, not just in Delaware, but across the country, is loss of habitat. So loss of habitat due to housing developments, loss of habitat due to agricultural practices, loss of habitat due to drilling for oil and natural gas.
Well, specifically in Delaware.
Specifically in Delaware, it would be more towards housing development and agriculture. That's the two largest threats that we face to habitats.
And do you have recent statistics on this? Do you have any analytics on wildlife that's been threatened because of housing developments or all the other threats?
So we're looking at a potential 30% of our population being at risk.
When you say our population, what are you talking about?
So I'm talking about all types of wildlife, the things that you could think of offhand: birds, butterflies, mammals, macroinvertebrates, all aspects of wildlife. There's a 30% risk of them becoming endangered or extinct because of invasives. More and more of us want to plant things that look pretty in our yards, yet oftentimes they can take over and actually kill out the natives. So we encourage people to plant native species and to look to where we are. We're in a rather large region for native species, so it should be easy to go to your local nursery or Home Depot and Lowe's and ask for them.
Wonderful. Thank you so much both for coming in. I appreciate it. Brenna Goggin is the Director of Advocacy at the Delaware Nature Society, and Martha Narvaez is the policy scientist at the University of Delaware, or a policy. Yes. I'm sure you have more than one, a policy scientist at the University of Delaware. The Delaware Way continues right after this.